Imagine opening your TFSA tomorrow and discovering someone who earned exactly what you earned now has $250,000 more than you. Same age, same career, same opportunities. The only difference was a handful of ordinary decisions that never felt important at the time. That isn't a fictional story. It's happening quietly to millions of Canadians every single year. And there's a good chance you're making at least one of those decisions today. Two Canadians begin their financial journey at almost exactly the same place. Let's call them Sarah and Michael. They open their very first TFSA within weeks of each other. They contribute similar amounts. They earn similar incomes. Neither of them is a financial expert. Neither has insider knowledge. Neither can predict the stock market. 30 years later, Michael retires with more than $250,000 more than Sarah, not because he discovered some secret investment, not because he was luckier, and not because he earned more money. The difference came from three ordinary decisions so ordinary that most people never realize they're making them. Here's the surprising part. If you met Sarah and Michael today, you'd probably think Sarah was the more careful investor. She avoids unnecessary risks. She waits until she's confident. She likes knowing her money is safe. Michael seems different. He's willing to make decisions before he has every answer. He accepts uncertainty. Sometimes, that even looks irresponsible. And yet, history has often rewarded Michael's approach over the long term. Why? Because wealth has a strange habit of growing where certainty never exists. Before we answer that question, I want you to picture something. The day Sarah and Michael opened their TFSAs, they each planted a tiny oak sapling in their backyard. The trees were identical, the soil was identical, the weather was identical. For years, almost nothing seemed to happen. Every time they looked outside, the trees appeared almost exactly the same. But beneath the surface, where nobody could see, something extraordinary was happening. Roots were spreading, quietly, patiently, preparing for growth. That wouldn't become obvious until years later. Money behaves much the same way. The biggest changes rarely happen where people are looking. They're happening underneath, long before anyone notices the results. By the end of this video, you'll understand why one of those trees eventually towers over the other. More importantly, you'll know which tree your own financial future looks more like. But to understand what separated Sarah and Michael, you first need to understand one thing, because almost everything Canadians believe about the TFSA starts with a misunderstanding. Ironically, it's hidden in the name itself. Before we uncover the first mistake, a quick disclaimer. This video is for educational purposes only and isn't personalized financial advice. Always do your own research and consider speaking with a qualified financial professional before making investment decisions. Now, let's begin. When most Canadians hear the words tax-free savings account, their attention immediately lands on one word, savings. And honestly, that's completely understandable. The name makes it sound like a place where money quietly waits, safe, protected, patiently sitting there until you need it. But despite its name, a TFSA isn't simply a savings account. It's one of the most powerful tax shelters available to Canadians. Every January, eligible Canadians receive new TFSA contribution room. For many people, it's just another government limit. But for someone who understands compounding, it's another opportunity to plant a seed that could grow for decades. Think of your TFSA like a greenhouse. A greenhouse doesn't grow a tree. It creates the perfect environment for growth. The tree still needs sunlight, healthy soil, water, and most importantly, time. A TFSA works exactly the same way. The account itself doesn't build wealth. The investments inside it do. The TFSA simply protects that growth from taxes, and once you truly understand that, everything changes. Because suddenly, the question isn't, how much money is sitting inside my TFSA? The real question becomes, is my money actually growing? And that's the exact moment. Sarah and Michael begin taking very different paths. Imagine Sarah and Michael a few weeks after opening their TFSAs. Both of them log into their accounts, both make their very first contribution. If you looked at their balances that day, they would appear almost identical, the same dollars, the same account, the same starting point, but that's where their financial journeys quietly begin to separate. Sarah looks at her balance and smiles. She feels accomplished. She did exactly what she believed she was supposed to do. She opened a TFSA, she transferred money into it, and now her money is safe. Michael also smiles. But before closing his laptop, he asks himself one simple question. What is this money supposed to do for me over the next 30 years? That single question changes everything, because Sarah believes she's finished investing. Michael realizes he hasn't started yet. The first mistake is believing that putting money into a TFSA automatically means you're investing. That misunderstanding is incredibly common, because the TFSA itself never creates wealth. It simply creates the opportunity for wealth to grow. Think back to the greenhouse. A greenhouse can't grow a tree by itself. It simply creates the perfect environment. The tree still needs healthy soil, water, sunlight, and years of patient growth. Your TFSA works exactly the same way. The account protects your investments from tax, but it doesn't generate returns. The investments inside it do. Once you understand that difference, you stop asking, how much money is sitting in my TFSA? And you start asking, is my money actually working? That one shift in thinking can change everything. Now, this doesn't mean everyone should rush out and buy individual stocks. Far from it. The goal isn't taking unnecessary risk. The goal is understanding the purpose of the account. For many long-term investors, that means owning diversified investments designed to grow steadily over decades, not because they're exciting, but because they allow time to do what time has always done best. Imagine building the perfect greenhouse, strong, secure, exactly the way it should be. Then, you leave every flower pot empty. 30 years later, the greenhouse still looks beautiful, but nothing ever grew inside it. It sounds obvious when we're talking about plants, yet financially, people unknowingly do something remarkably similar. Every year, millions of dollars flow into TFSAs and then quietly remain in cash, protected, available, but doing very little. There's another force quietly working in the background: inflation. It rarely feels dramatic. Its power comes from consistency. Imagine trying to walk up a downward moving escalator. You may still move forward, but every step becomes just a little harder than it should be. Cash behaves much the same way. It often feels like nothing is happening. But purchasing power is slowly slipping away, 1 year at a time. The greatest danger isn't losing your money overnight. It's losing what your money can buy, while time keeps moving forward. Michael understands something Sarah doesn't. The greatest advantage of investing isn't finding the perfect investment. It's giving compounding enough years to begin doing the heavy lifting for you. Imagine someone places a small snowball at the top of a mountain. At first, it barely changes. You could almost carry it with one hand. But if you leave it moving, it slowly gathers more snow, then more, until eventually it becomes far larger than anything you could have built yourself. Compounding behaves in much the same way. The beginning feels slow, sometimes even disappointing. Some years feel rewarding, others feel frustrating. Occasionally, it feels like nothing is happening at all. But beneath the surface, just like the roots of an oak tree, something is quietly changing. Every year of growth creates the opportunity for even more growth the following year. Returns begin earning returns, then those returns begin earning returns of their own. Eventually, time begins contributing more to your portfolio than your monthly deposits. That's why experienced investors rarely obsess over what happened this month. They're thinking about where they might be 20 or 30 years from now. Because they understand a simple truth: money becomes extraordinary when time is left uninterrupted. Sarah isn't making a reckless decision. She's making the decision millions of Canadians make every year. Nothing feels wrong, Nothing feels urgent. Everything feels responsible. And that's exactly why this mistake is so expensive. While Sarah's money waits, Michael's money quietly goes to work. At first, the difference is almost impossible to notice. 1 year passes, then another. The balances still look surprisingly similar. If you compared them today, you'd probably conclude it doesn't matter very much. And that's exactly what makes compounding so deceptive. Its greatest rewards almost always arrive later, not at the beginning. The first few years look ordinary. The extraordinary part comes much later. Money was no longer Sarah's biggest obstacle. Her emotions were. Because even people who understand compounding often make another mistake. A mistake that has nothing to do with choosing investments. A mistake driven by something far more powerful than numbers. Fear. For the next several years, Sarah and Michael continue doing exactly what they've always done. Every month, money goes into their TFSAs. Life feels wonderfully ordinary. Work becomes busier. Vacations come and go. Children grow older. Bills are paid. Birthdays are celebrated. And almost without noticing, another year quietly slips by, then another. One Saturday morning, Sarah is sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee. She scrolls through the news. The headlines are impossible to ignore. Markets tumble as recession fears grow. Experts warn investors to stay cautious. Interest rates remain uncertain. Could stocks fall even further? She locks her phone, looks out the window, and quietly thinks, maybe this isn't the right time. I'll wait until things settle down. It feels responsible. After all, why would anyone willingly invest while the world feels so uncertain? Michael reads the very same headlines. He pauses, takes another sip of coffee, then calmly closes the app. Not because the headlines are wrong, but because he understands something they've never been able to predict: the future. Every generation has faced uncertainty. The headlines change, the fears change, the experts change, but the feeling never really does. 10 years ago, people worried about something different. 20 years ago, there were different crises. 30 years ago, different predictions, different headlines, the same uncertainty. The strange thing about uncertainty is that it never disappears. There has never been a year when the entire world collectively agreed, everything is finally certain. The economy changes, governments change, technology changes, interest rates change, markets change. Uncertainty doesn't. Imagine standing beside a sailboat tied to a dock. You promise yourself, I'll leave as soon as the ocean becomes perfectly calm. So you wait. Tomorrow, next month, next year. The waves never completely disappear. The wind simply changes direction. Years later, the boat is still sitting at the dock, not because it couldn't sail, because it never left. Investing works much the same way. The goal isn't finding perfect conditions. The goal is continuing the journey through imperfect ones. Because here's the question almost nobody asks: what if waiting is actually the biggest risk of all? Sarah waits another month, then another. Each decision feels completely reasonable, completely temporary, completely harmless. But time doesn't pause, simply because we do. Every month spent waiting is one less month compounding has to work. Michael keeps investing, not because he's fearless, not because he enjoys seeing markets fall, and certainly not because he knows what happens next. He doesn't. Nobody does. He simply accepts something that's uncomfortable, but true. The future has always been uncertain, and it probably always will be. A few years later, someone asked Sarah a simple question. When would you have finally felt comfortable investing? She pauses, smiles softly, then quietly admits, honestly, I don't know. Because every time one fear disappeared, another one took its place. A different election, a different recession, a different prediction, a different reason to wait. The finish line kept moving. Fear has a remarkable way of disguising itself as patience. History has never rewarded investors for accurately predicting the future, but over long periods of time, it has often rewarded those who accepted that they couldn't, not every year, not every investment, not every market. But patience has generally outperformed prediction. That's why experienced investors repeat the same sentence, generation after generation, not because it sounds clever, because they've watched it prove itself, again and again. It's not about timing the market, it's about time in the market. Eventually, Sarah begins investing. From that day forward, she and Michael contribute similar amounts. They own similar diversified investments. They follow similar long-term strategies. Everything is finally the same, except one thing: the years Sarah spent waiting. Compounding can multiply money. It can recover from market declines. It can reward patience. But there's one thing it can never do. It cannot rewind time. Now, look back at those two oak trees. For years, they appeared almost identical. But while Sarah waited, Michael's tree quietly continued growing. Its roots stretched deeper into the earth. Its trunk grew stronger. Its branches reached a little farther toward the sunlight. None of those changes looked dramatic, not in one season, not even in 1 year. But beneath the surface, where nobody was watching, time was quietly doing its work. The strongest roots are always invisible, and so is the true cost of waiting. By the time most people finally notice it, those roots have already been growing for years. And yet, even investors who start early, stay invested, and understand compounding can still make one final mistake, a mistake that doesn't happen when they invest. It happens when they interrupt the journey. Years pass. Sarah and Michael continue living remarkably similar lives. They work hard, receive promotions, celebrate birthdays, take vacations, pay their mortgages, help their children. Life keeps moving, just as it always does. And that's exactly why the third mistake is so easy to miss. Nothing dramatic happens, no warning appears, no alarm goes off, no one calls to tell you. Today you quietly interrupted decades of future growth. One summer, Sarah decides to withdraw money from her TFSA. The family needs a newer vehicle. A few years later, there's a home renovation they've been planning for years, then another withdrawal, a different goal, a different reason. Every decision feels reasonable. Every decision improves their life, and that's important to understand. Using your TFSA isn't a mistake. In fact, its flexibility is one of its greatest advantages. Unlike an RRSP, TFSA withdrawals are generally tax-free, and in most cases, the contribution room you withdraw is restored on January 1st of the following calendar year. That's exactly how the account was designed. The mistake is forgetting what that money was becoming. Imagine watching your favorite movie. You're completely invested in the story. Then, 10 minutes before the ending, you turn it off. You experienced almost everything, but you never saw the payoff. Compounding works much the same way. The beginning usually feels slow, sometimes even disappointing. The middle feels encouraging, but the final years are often where the most extraordinary growth begins, because eventually, your investments begin earning returns on years of previous returns. The snowball you've been patiently pushing uphill finally becomes powerful enough to keep rolling almost by itself. Now imagine stopping it every few years, not forever, just long enough, to lose some of that momentum. That's what repeated interruptions do, not because compounding disappears, but because every interruption asks time to begin helping you all over again. And time is the one thing no investor can ever earn back. 30 years after opening their TFSAs, Sarah and Michael meet for coffee, the same city, the same careers, the same incomes, the same opportunities. Neither of them discovered a miracle stock. Neither predicted the next market crash. Neither became wealthy overnight. Both simply made ordinary decisions over and over again. When they compare their investment accounts, the difference is impossible to ignore. Michael's portfolio quietly benefited from decades of uninterrupted growth. Sarah's portfolio spent years waiting, stopping, starting again. For a long moment, neither of them says anything. Sarah looks down at her coffee, then quietly asks, "When did our paths become so different?" Michael looks down at his coffee. A quiet smile crosses his face. Not because he has an easy answer, but because he knows there never was one. It wasn't one decision. It was hundreds of ordinary decisions. Almost none of them felt important. Until they all did. Sarah smiles. I always thought it would be one big moment. Michael lets out a soft laugh. I think most people do. They spend their lives waiting for one life-changing decision, when it's usually hundreds of ordinary ones that quietly change everything. Now, look back, one final time, at those two oak trees. Sarah's tree is healthy, beautiful, strong, but every few years, its growth was interrupted. Michael's tree remained rooted, season after season, storm after storm. Its roots stretched deeper, its trunk grew stronger, its branches reached higher. The difference was never the seed, it wasn't the soil, it wasn't luck, it was what happened, year after year, when nobody was paying attention. That's how wealth is built, not through dramatic moments, but through ordinary ones. The automatic contribution you almost forgot about. The investment you didn't sell during frightening headlines. The month you kept investing, even when the news told you not to. The year you stayed patient, then another, until one day, people assume you simply got lucky. But you know something they don't. Wealth rarely comes from one brilliant decision. It comes from ordinary decisions, repeated consistently, for an extraordinary length of time. The years are going to pass, whether your money is invested or not. 30 years from now, you'll still wake up one morning. The only question is, what was your money doing while you were living your life, growing, or waiting? If stories like this change the way you think about money, I'd love to have you here. Subscribe to Wealth Roots 101. Every week, we tell stories about Canadian investing, retirement, and building lasting wealth, so you can make better financial decisions with confidence. Because understanding money shouldn't feel overwhelming, it should feel empowering. There's an old proverb that says, "The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, the second best time is today." You can't change the decisions you made yesterday, none of us can, but you can decide what your money begins doing tomorrow, because every mighty oak spent years growing before anyone noticed its strength, and every strong portfolio begins with a single decision, followed by years of quiet patience. Money grows where patience takes root. I'll see you in the next one.